Hello there, welcome, come in, have a seat. This is a full compilation of a 3-part series that I made a year ago, in which I beat The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom without using any of the items that existed in Breath of the Wild. I made this compilation because not many people saw the originals. It was still early in my YouTube career, and when you compare it to the video where I did the reverse in Breath of the Wild, there's a huge gap in views. What I noticed as well from doing multi-part series is that the views drop off significantly after episode 1, seen prominently throughout my channel. Therefore, I want people to have a chance to experience this wild ride who never saw it. I'm looking at you, the 1000 plus people who subscribed for that brutal Breath of the Wild journey. Note that I've combined the videos without doing any editing, except for attempting to make the audio sound better, an amendment to something I said that was completely wrong, and removing the intros and the outros. I do have an actual new Zelda video idea in the pipeline though. And by in the pipeline, I mean it's inside my head and I'm trying to find time to convert it into an actual video, but it'll be released in time. Anyway, without further ado, here we go. Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel where I haven't come up with a tagline yet. Today I'll be seeing if I can complete The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom without ever using items that existed in Breath of the Wild. This means I have to get from the start of the game to defeating the final boss while being restricted to only using items that were newly introduced in Tears of the Kingdom. I created this handy spreadsheet where I have listed all of the items that are in tiers, with the items in black writing being new and the ones in red being existing items that are therefore restricted. My definition of use for each restricted item is as follows. Restricted weapons cannot be used to attack anything or anyone, and nothing can be fused to them. Restricted shields cannot be used to block and also can't have anything fused to them. Restricted bows cannot fire any arrows. Restricted armour cannot be put on. Restricted materials cannot be consumed, fused or cooked. Restricted food and elixirs cannot be consumed or made. And restricted key items just simply cannot be used. I am allowing non-inventory items such as heart containers, stamina vessels, rupees and small keys however. More in-depth features of these rules will crop up later, but I'll mention them as they appear. This will be released in 3 parts due to the sheer amount of video content that was produced by me completing this challenge. But don't you worry, the wait for each one won't be long. But enough of that, let's just jump right in. So obviously straight away you may be thinking that this challenge is null and void from the beginning, as you start the game with the Master Sword and are expected to kill a few enemies with it to proceed. And while yes, I originally planned on counting the challenge as started when Link wakes up in the Room of Awakening, there's actually a way around it. There is a glitch that is used in the any % speedrun in which Link can clip through the ceiling of this cave and run all the way to the end, which skips ever having to fight the Kisses. This only exists on version 1.0, which is the version of the game I was playing on anyway, which was also required for a bunch of other glitches later. The problem with this, however, is that I'm not a speedrunner and generally I'm just terrible at these sorts of frame-perfect tricks. I managed a grand total of 2 successful attempts. The first time resulted in me accidentally triggering a cutscene with Zelda, causing me to be pulled back into the cave. The second time I was so surprised to actually get the clip after failing over 100 times that I immediately voided out. And so I gave up on that, as there is another clip that can be used here. I tried the alternative one, requiring me to be positioned at this rock, jump to this stalactite, and then climb up and be positioned in an extremely specific place. After jumping up while in this place, I voided out again because this was probably attempt number 5000 and I wasn't even paying attention by this point. It just wouldn't fall kindly for me. I did manage this a second time while not recording, though it didn't get far before falling out of the world again. So, now I have 2 options. Spend a lifetime perfecting this glitch, or turn to a very cheeky workaround. Of course I chose the latter, because otherwise this video was never going to come out. The Master Sword that you see here in the prologue is not actually the Master Sword. Well, lore-wise it is, but mechanically it is a unique item known simply as MSG Not Found. It has infinite stamina, no description, and higher power than the Master Sword and cannot be viewed in inventory without glitches. Because of this, using this in the prologue doesn't break the rules. As I said, it's a bit of a scummy workaround, but this will be the only time in the challenge where I use this sort of logic to justify using something like this. So anyway, with that logic, by killing these Kisses, I'm actually not breaking the rules of the challenge. Obviously I would have preferred to pull off the glitches properly, but just please let me have this one. I spent an entire Sunday afternoon failing this glitch instead of socialising. Anyway, I got to the end as per normal. The big, long, unskippable cutscene played with Ganondorf destroying MSG not found along with Link's hearts and his arm. Then Link woke up and was finally able to actually play the game. Thankfully, when Link wakes up, he has no armour and only has one weapon, the Decayed Master Sword. This is also technically a different weapon from the Master Sword, so I can use that if I want. Unlike that glitch item before though, this genuinely is a different item. Different name, different icon, different power, different description, no debate about it. Not that you get much use out of it, it breaks after a couple of hits, so it's not too relevant anyway. I did all the usual start of game stuff, escaping from the Room of Awakening, picking up the archaic legwear, which are a new item, so all good to wear, and diving off into the outdoors to start the epic title reveal. Just a PSA to all you kids out there, by the way. If you dive from that height into water, you will not survive. Do not imitate your favourite character, he's just built different. I got my first proper weapon, a tree branch. Now here's another quirk with my rules. Tree branches exist in Breath of the Wild, and I therefore got rid of it. This one is made of different wood and looks different, but I'm not allowing myself to use it, because that's just bending the rules a little bit too much. Also, sky shrooms are new, so they're fine to use, but apples are out of the question. Bye bye, apple. I unfortunately had to avoid almost all combat because my weapon selection was pitiful due to the expectations of using the fuse mechanic to make your own weapons, so I fled from most fights. Talking to this construct, I was given the Puripad. I'm very glad they made this a new item. The one you get in Breath of the Wild is called the Sheikah Slate, and it's actually a completely different item, as the new one has more upgraded features and it looks different. Which is good because the challenge would be impossible otherwise. And now it's time to explore the Great Sky Island properly. I had 4 shrines to complete before I could leave, with each one giving me a new right hand ability. Thankfully these abilities are all brand new and distinct from the runes that you get in Breath of the Wild, so there is no restriction whatsoever on me using them. Which is great because again, challenge would be impossible otherwise. I never thought I'd be so pleased to find a wooden stick, but this is actually a new item, so I kept it close to me. I made my way to the Temple of Time, which didn't open up yet because I hadn't gone to the shrines yet. I met Roru, who looks nothing like he did in Ocarina of Time. Oh wait, they actually just retconned Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, so they're no longer canonical, so I guess anything in these games is fine now. Hey, it's me from the future. I won't dwell on this for too long, but what I said there is completely wrong. Basically, Nintendo posted something on their website that slightly made it look like those 2 games aren't canon, and a million game journalists immediately pounced on it and spread that misinformation like they always do. And unfortunately, I fell for it at the time. But it's not true at all. They're definitely canon, their timeline position is just deliberately vague. Anyway, let's get back to it. Climbing up the nearby pillar, I reached that shrine. I won't be saying their names with my dialect because I can't pronounce most actual words correctly, never mind Uku. Anyway, I got Ultra Hand, which is magnesis if it was actually really good. It lets you pick up and stick anything together that isn't nailed down and isn't alive, and it's one of the reasons why I love this game so much. And also, in this shrine, there are no required items, so nothing to worry about in terms of the challenge run. Getting to the end, I got a Light of Blessing. Light of Blessing. Not a Spirit Orb, therefore a separate item. And I'm very glad for that, because otherwise this run was going to be a whole lot harder. Actually, it would be impossible because you're required to get a heart container to leave. Speeding things up a bit, I found an arrow. Yep, can't make use of that. On the way to the next shrine, I found a stone axe, which is a stone fused with a wooden stick. Now, in cases like these, I am allowed to use a weapon with a fused object as long as the base weapon and the item are both new to Tears of the Kingdom. If it's an actual overworld object, it's always allowed since they were never inventory items. We'll get more in-depth with fusing in just a minute though. I noticed another level of tedium that I'd created for myself as I realised I can never use wood, meaning I could never make campfires and had to rely solely on cooking pots or stables for resting. Oh yeah, and I couldn't use Korok seeds. As much as I was glad I would never have to find them all, it also meant I could never increase my inventory space at all. 9 weapons, 4 shields, 5 bows. That's it. Excitingly, I got to kill my first ever enemy of this run. It's dropped another new item, a thick stick. The horns and zonai charges these constructs dropped would be useful later on as well. Using top level engineering knowledge, I constructed a complex machine in order to carry me across the water and entered the next shrine. Here I gained the fuse ability, which is the main reason why not too many weapons were added to this game, since they expect you to experiment with combining items together. This wasn't too helpful for me of course, but fortunately most of the weapons up on the Sky Island are new anyway. Rusty Claymore though? Nope. Existed in the last game, goodbye. As I said earlier, in terms of fusing, objects that aren't actually in your inventory are fine to use, so even though these boulders are certainly in Breath of the Wild, I'm still allowed to fuse them to my weapons. But now, this is where things took a turn for the worst. Fire fruits are of course a brand new item, and you'll bet you'll be seeing a lot of them throughout these videos. The old wooden bow is also new, despite its name, but that's not the problem here. The problem is in fact arrows. This game has one type of arrow, and it's called an arrow, obviously. It can have any material fused to it, but no matter what, it'll always use an arrow when fired, meaning that I can never use a bow at any point in this challenge. Well, I can pull them out and equip them, but shooting anything from them is a big no-no. That chest up there is required to move forward, but thankfully they did add in the ability to throw any items, meaning I could still burn the platform with a fire fruit to retrieve the key. I'll just reiterate a rule I mentioned at the very beginning as well. Any items that don't actually appear in your inventory are fine to make use of, those being small keys, heart containers, stamina vessels and rupees. I would have liked to eliminate these if possible, but unfortunately it is impossible to even leave the Great Sky Island without getting a heart container. Finishing the rest of the shrine, I got to my second Light of Blessing and moved on to the next one. Outside, a construct gave me the energy cell, which would come in handy a little bit later. Another little thing I'll just mention for this run, I will occasionally pick up an item from the previous game instinctively, and I'll often forget to drop them, so every so often I just made sure to do a detox of my inventory so I didn't accidentally break any rules. One item that is allowed though is a Bright Bloom Seed, very useful in the depths, but we're nowhere near there yet. Now these big lads are called Bubble Frogs and they drop Bubble Gems, a new type of currency that can be traded with an NPC later for items, some of which I was planning on making use of. There is one of them in every cave, so I made sure to hunt them down in each cave I entered. Also, you're meant to use a bow to kill them, so killing them is an absolute pain. I finally found something to make Link look a bit more decent. Thankfully this and the archaic legwear are new to this game, so all good to wear these. The energy cell showed its purpose when I needed to cross this lake, though this was certainly not going to help beat the challenge. It can go all the way up to 48 segments, and I planned on doing just that. But I wasn't quite at that stage yet. I'll just mention as well how glad I am that they added stam bulbs, as this is the only stamina regenerating item that is unique to this game. I headed into the mining cave, lighting up the place, and found my first zonite. This stuff was absolutely vital to my later success, and as were the forged constructs. Please thank them in advance for me. I also got my first zonai devices. Many of them exist and all are new to this game, so you better believe I was taking full advantage of that fact. This plant, right here. It made me realise something horrible was about to happen. You see, these are spicy peppers. They exist in Breath of the Wild, so I'm not allowed to use them. I can't cook using them either. They are used to make food that protects against the cold. The next area is very cold and I take damage every few seconds due to that fact. I have 3 hearts. I am going to die. That was what was going through my head, and rightly so. I didn't do much planning for this video, certainly nowhere near as much as I do for the Pokemon ones, so this wasn't something that I was anticipating. After clearing my inventory of its restricted items, I needed to figure out a solution to this. I was low on food. The only edible items I had were sky shrooms and fire fruits, both of which heal 1/4 of a heart, so getting to that shrine in the distance was going to be a challenge. The fact that enemies kept popping out of the ground and the fact that I lost half a heart every 10 seconds or so were not helping. I went back into the cave, as I'd thought of a genius play. Also another thing I'll quickly point out, that amiibo power existed in Breath of the Wild, and although it's technically not an item, I decided to never use it. I actually do own every single Legend of Zelda amiibo because I'm a massive loser, but that's a story for another day. Point is, amiibo use is banned in this run. So anyway, my 10,000 IQ strategy was to fuse a fire fruit to a weapon, as I know that fire weapons heat up Link and protect from low temperatures. But it was not to be. Rubies are the only items in this game that can actually give a weapon a higher temperature as far as I know, and not only are they already in Breath of the Wild, but I'd not be getting one up here anyway. Regardless of anything, I was low in health and needed to get HP back. I didn't have too many options, but I did still have a few new items to cook with, so I was all good. Oh no, that's not good. Steamed mushrooms are an item from Breath of the Wild, so I had just broken the rules of the challenge. But what happens if I break the rules? Well, originally I was actually planning on deleting the save and starting again, but that was a tiny bit too harsh. And I did want this video to be uploaded at some point in time, so I settled for being forced to reload my last save file. That way, any progress or advancements I would have made while breaking the rules had been undone completely, and they never happened. Reloading back into the snowy land actually gave me a spark of inspiration. If my theory was correct, the game ticks down the temperature damage after a certain amount of time has passed while playing. Therefore, if I continuously save the game, then load the game, that timer would be reset. And by doing so, even though it would take a very long time and would be extraordinarily boring, I would be able to reach the shrine without taking any damage. So I just kept doing this. I would run forward for about 10 seconds, then save the game, then load that same save file. And guess what? It worked. It was a cheap trick, but it didn't violate my rules, so it was completely fine to do. When I reached this cave, I found another friend I was looking forward to seeing, a bomb flower. These are not in Breath of the Wild. That game has the remote bomb rune, which is completely different, as they are infinitely spawned bombs that can be remotely detonated, as opposed to these naturally occurring bombs. So of course, bomb flowers were on the table. Another thing that's on the table are the items dropped by likes, which were newly added to Tears of the Kingdom. And I got my first death. Upstairs I found a new shield, the old wooden shield, and it also had a flame emitter, which was a fun find. And completely within the rules, of course, so I got revenge from earlier using said shield and also got my first like stone, a nice new item, and unfortunately I was back into the cold. So, more ultra slow Nintendo Switch load times. I condensed 20 minutes of footage into a few seconds and reached the shrine. This gave me the Ascend power, another that I absolutely love using. The start of this game was me just remembering how fun all the new powers are. I'm sure it won't get hair-tearingly frustrating once I get down to the surface. So you know how it goes by now, go through the ceilings, get to the end, and get another blessing. I had to return to the Temple of Time but realised I hadn't actually unlocked warping yet, which was miserable, so more cold reloading had to occur. However, thanks to me now having Ascend, I was able to get to this jutting out tree branch and therefore found the archaic warm greaves, which are not only new to this game, but give cold resistance, so I never had to do that save and load technique ever again. I actually did end up freeing a Korok. The other 999 remained hidden for all eternity, as those seeds would not be allowed to be used. Also, the sky contains a new fish, the ancient arowana, so I hoarded them when possible. I headed back to the temple and the door accepted me this time. After opening up, I went inside, gazed upon this tier of the kingdom, and then a cutscene with Zelda happened, and you know the rest. I got the recall ability, tried to leave, got told no because I needed more hearts, and had to go to another shrine that had appeared. This was the sole reason it was 100% required to get a heart container to complete this challenge, because literally nobody in the speedrunning community has figured out how to leave the Great Sky Island with 3 hearts. I had now unlocked warping though, so getting there was easy. I had to do rewindy puzzles, and at the end got my 4th blessing, got a 4th heart, and then was able to open the big door. With that done, it was time to leave this godforsaken island and play the game for real. I forgot that you're meant to actually get to the end of the platform and watch the cutscene first. So, Link sent the decayed Master Sword back in time, Zelda made it into a new Master Sword, but he doesn't get it yet. And he never will be getting it because my rules dictate as such. As I was plunging down to the surface, I was thinking of my plans for the run, how I would order everything and making sure that I was prepared for all of the upcoming boss fights. Well, I probably wasn't actually thinking that, to be honest. I was probably stuffing my face with one hand while watching YouTube videos on my second monitor. But the point is, I had plenty to do and I couldn't reliably run to the end of the game and expect to win with what I had at that moment. Also, again, don't jump from a mile in the air into water and expect to live. It will not happen. Touching grass for the first time meant I had officially taken my first steps into Hyrule proper, and therefore it was time to truly begin. I decided that step 1 of my grand plan would be to get auto-build. This is because my self-imposed rules massively restrict my freedom of movement, and so being able to build a few effective flying machines and call upon them whenever I want would be ideal. Another part of my plan was to hoard as many Sundalions as possible, as this is a new item that protects against gloom damage, which is a big problem in the late game. I also, as stated earlier, was going to clear any caves I found, as they all had bubble frogs, useful for later. I made my way to the new settlement, Lookout Landing, and everyone was shocked at Link's return. Some context for those unaware, he's been dead for what is speculated to be 6 years, so naturally folks are a bit surprised. Also context for those who hadn't played Breath of the Wild who wondered why everyone was getting nosebleeds from looking at Pura, it's because she accidentally de-aged herself in the first game, and fixed it in this game. But Link wasn't interested, he just wanted to get on with his quest. Anyway, she had some things for me to do. I was reluctantly going along with it, knowing that at any moment I could have restricted items thrust upon me. A big project that I was doing in between everything else during the setup stage of the challenge was entering every single shrine I found. Some were impossible for various reasons, but I needed to give each one a try. This one was easy, as it was just a boring combat tutorial one, and at the end I got a Zonite sword, which I was going to try and hoard as many of as possible, as they are new to this game. I won't go over every single shrine I did because we'd be here all week, but I'll occasionally mention when I do one just to keep awareness on progress. Those shrines would be vital because I am absolutely awful at avoiding damage in this game. Climbing the oddly barren path up to the guardhouse in Hyrule Castle, I came across another moral quandary, as all the weapons from Breath of the Wild now have decayed and perfect versions, with the decayed ones having the same name, but perfect ones having a little symbol after them. I decided that the perfect ones still counted as the same weapon because, again, that would be boring otherwise. Tragically, soup ladles are also banned. I talked to Captain Hawes, then headed back to Pura. On the way, I helped Addison hold up a Hudson sign. There are 81 of these in this game, and yes, I actually have done them all in my main file, thanks for asking. Anyway, after helping him, he will always give you some items as reward. Some rupees, some food, and a sleepover ticket. Wait, the food. Veggie rice balls are in Breath of the Wild, so I can't eat them. What makes this a bigger problem is the fact that you can't drop food, so there's no way to get rid of it. I could sell it, but one of the rules I decided on was that selling or exchanging an item counts as using it, and therefore that wouldn't be allowed. Therefore I had to be careful about quest rewards, as the food inventory is limited and I needed all the space I could get for later battles. I told Pura the news, and then a part I was dreading was coming up. The outcome here would determine a lot of the difficulty, especially for me specifically. I saved the game before proceeding, just in case, then talked to Pura at the Skyview Tower. After talking with her, all the towers in Hyrule were activated for use, but that wasn't the worry. The real concern was the fact that once I activated this terminal, I could be given an item that I can't use, but having it may cause me a lot of pain. I activated the warp point anyway, and was given the paraglider. This, of course, is in Breath of the Wild. By having this, I would almost certainly instinctively use it, so I reloaded my save file before I got it. And for those wondering, I know it's a different design, and I know you can change the fabric and make it technically different, but no, I'm not doing that. It's a paraglider, it's the same thing. No paragliders in this run. I am allowed to pick it up later if I so wish, but if I ever deploy it, I'll have to reload my save file immediately. Another annoying thing about not having a paraglider though is the fact that you need it to map out the region, meaning the entire map will be blank, which is terrible for me as my sense of direction is non-existent. But what was next for me? Well, I decided that I'd try to get to the depths. I knew if I could get down there just once, I'd have access to a light route and I could warp there at any time. Also, I found the first shrine I couldn't do. This one requires a paraglider as you're expected to ride the wind from this fan. Shrines don't allow you to bring in your own Zonai devices, so I couldn't just build a bridge out of portable cooking pots and call it a day. This continued for many more shrines, which was frustrating, especially since some of them were also a nightmare to find. But this challenge run was my choice, so I had only myself to blame. I met Robbie for the first time. His quest requires you to go down into the depths, but as far as I could remember it also requires you to use the camera, which existed in Breath of the Wild, so his questline was off limits. And now we come to the biggest challenge I had faced so far. Figuring out how I could jump down a chasm without a paraglider. And in case you were going to suggest Zonai devices, the game has a threshold in chasms where you get automatically kicked off of any that you're riding. There is a glitch where if you change weapons just before hitting the ground, it negates all damage. It's pretty much frame perfect, so I knew I wouldn't be able to get it the first time, but decided to have a go at it in practice. On my first attempt, the game froze and I accidentally pulled out my bow and died instantly. Good going, me. I did the nearby shrine while brainstorming with myself on better solutions than using a frame perfect glitch. However, I actually used up all my brain power trying to figure out how to properly angle these blocks, so by the time I was done I hadn't thought of anything. I just decided to keep jumping down and hopefully pull off the glitch successfully. It didn't work very well. I did find various unique, unusual and creative ways to kill Link though, so at least there's that. I did eventually start getting some of the button combos down, but it still just wasn't producing any positive results. Just that same kind grunt and that sad piano tune. After a grand total of 2 hours of just jumping down this chasm and continuously killing Link while watching my friends stream the third case in Danganronpa 2 on my other monitor, which is what I will now forever associate this challenge with, I eventually learned the definition of insanity and gave up, deciding I'd go do something else instead. That something was more shrines, so I got to it. However, on the way there I noticed this beauty falling from the sky, and I had an idea. I tested to see if I would take damage if I was standing on it while falling, and to my delight I took no damage. I dragged it all the way over to the chasm, held it over, then missed the recall. Okay, let's go again. I used recall to hold it in place while I jumped on it, then rode it down into the depths. Upon landing, I was still alive and I had successfully gotten here without a paraglider. I activated the light route so I had a warp point and my next objective was back on the menu. With the area lit up, I attempted to find the Great Abandoned Central Mine, but with my aforementioned lack of an internal compass, I failed at that for a while. Also, puff shrooms are a new item and they're pretty useful for avoiding fights, something I had to do a lot in this run. I also took every deep firefly I found, even though I had no intention of using them. Something about the noise of collecting a massive amount of things at once is so satisfying. Oh right, I'm supposed to be finding auto-build. I did take a few more detours, though these were more useful. I needed lots of zonite, and while not the best defensively, the miner's top I found here was certainly better than the top I had on, plus the light was a welcome addition while in the depths. I also picked up every pole I found because they can be traded for bomb flowers and dark clumps, two other very useful items that can sometimes be in short supply. After an amount of time I'd rather not admit to, I found the Great Abandoned Central Mine, and step one of my grand plan that I'd made up on the spot earlier that day was about to come to fruition. I found my first large zonite, very useful currency for later on. I met this researcher who was researching this construct. After showing off my abilities, I unlocked auto-build at long last. I used it to fix their car, and then, plot twist, they're not researchers, they're members of the Yiga clan. Looking back, I definitely didn't need to initiate this. I could have just taken auto-build and left, but fighting Master Koga sounded like a fun idea, to be honest. I then fought him, his secret weapon being a car. I remember that while I was doing this fight, I was also on the phone, so I did this whole fight with one hand. Yes, I do have ridiculously long fingers. Thank you for inquiring. Anyway, I beat him, unnecessarily breaking almost all my weapons in the process. Was it worth it? Who knows? I never actually fought the Yiga clan again after this because I didn't want them spawning at random places in the overworld. So with that done, I decided on my next goal. Watching Master Koga fly away on such a magnificent machine made the decision for me. I was going to create some highly effective flying machines so I could get around in the air without the paraglider. To do this, I would need to also gather the zonite devices needed to use them, zonite to be able to call them with auto-build without needing more of the devices, and large zonite to trade for crystallized charges, which in turn would be converted into energy wells for more battery life. Speaking of, I found 100 in this chest, which is a good start. Apologies if you've never played this game, I'm sure every word of that went in one ear and out the other. So, as you can see, I didn't have enough zonite to actually buy these yet, but you'll see later that I had a trick up my sleeve to make this an easy process. In between this, I was slowly but surely making my way through Hyrule, one shrine at a time. Most were possible even with my restrictions, but many resulted in failure unfortunately. On my travels I met this NPC who sells Hylian tomatoes. The residents of Hyrule hadn't discovered tomatoes yet in Breath of the Wild, so I was free to buy, cook and consume any that I found. Although at this point I was very poor, so I could only afford one. I frequented the goddess statues when I had enough lights of blessing to get more hearts. Stamina vessels weren't quite as important, so I didn't take them very often. And now it's time to talk about my plans for the temples. An interesting quirk about these games is that you don't actually need to beat all of the dungeons to complete the game. In fact, you don't need to beat any of them. And that's not with glitches either. The game fully supports the player's decision to ignore all content and run straight to the end. Of course, doing so makes the final fights many times harder. The bosses of each temple that you don't beat will be required to fight before getting to the end of the game, but even so, that's good news for me since I knew that I wouldn't be able to beat all the temples. There are 5 in total, and I will go over my initial thoughts on each one in terms of the challenge. These are my initial thoughts. I've actually already beaten the game as of me saying these words, and you'll find out later if I predicted anything correctly. How about we start by talking about the Wind Temple? It's up here somewhere in Hebra. It's very, very high up, practically requires the paraglider to navigate, and it's freezing cold, with the only gear that can resist that level of cold existing in Breath of the Wild, those being the Snow Kill set and chilly elixirs. Also, I was convinced the boss would be impossible without the paraglider or bow. My verdict? Probably possible with Zonai devices, but the boss would be horrendously difficult. Then we have the Lightning Temple, which is down here. It's on the ground, so no flying required, however I was 99% sure there'd be no way to complete it, as you're not only required to shoot arrows constantly within the temple, but you need to fire one to actually progress the story to open it up in the first place. So my verdict was that it is absolutely impossible. Visiting the Fire Temple next, which is up here. No, it's there. No, it's there. I did the map scrolling at the time, knowing I'd be making the speech, though I probably should have looked at a map to know where the temples actually are. Anyway, this is another I was absolutely certain was impossible. Several reasons for this. I didn't think I would be capable of jumping down the Death Mountain chasm with no paraglider, because it's a huge way down with lots of rocks jutting out, and has lava at the bottom. Along with this, the temperature is so high that I'd be on fire the whole time, with no access to flamebreaker armour or fireproof elixirs. So my verdict was a big huge no. The Water Temple was yet another which I decided would be impossible without a single ounce of thought, because you're required to shoot an arrow to open the temple. Not to mention that I was certain that it requires the Zora armour as well, which is of course in Breath of the Wild. So no Water Temple. Finally, there's the Spirit Temple. I assumed that you need to beat all 4 of the others to open this up. I may have been wrong about this, I guess we'll find out later, but at that point I said there was no possible way of doing it because of this fact. So those were my thoughts when I began the challenge. Feel free to theorise amongst yourselves while waiting on part 2, as that's where I'll be tackling each temple. For now, it was exploration time. I couldn't just jump straight into doing temples with my current loadout, and at this point I didn't really have a concrete plan. Just run around and see what I can find while having a rough idea of what my endgame goals were. The run certainly stopped being silly and started being an uphill struggle, so I'll condense about 30 hours of gameplay into the highlights. I found out that when stam bulbs were cooked they gave me a new item, so I was safe to make them for stamina regen. I met Impa, but never bothered with her quest. I met Hestu, but he wanted Korok seeds, and that was not happening, so he was left hanging as well. I kept clearing caves, though I later found out that the Mystic set, the reason I was getting these bubble gems, doesn't actually protect against falling damage, making it useless to me. Also, the Glide set, which does negate falling damage when upgraded twice, requires key swings to upgrade, which existed in Breath of the Wild, so that was a no-go as well, ruining a lot of my future plans for the challenge. Also, these hands are terrifying, especially when you don't have a bow. Good thing none of them are mandatory though. I found a golden apple for the first time, a very useful item for sure, new to Tears of the Kingdom. I found an unfortunately large amount of shrines I couldn't do, for one reason or another. I got killed by gravity. Many times. Some of these were funny to look back on, though at the time I did not see the funny side of them. That montage of deaths was me attempting to reach Hebra, and here we see me getting to the Lucky Clover Gazette. It turns out to be a very useful location, and I've said this a lot, but you'll find out why later. I made a start on my quest to collect Zonai devices. I got a wild horse and tamed it, then gave it a very serious, fitting name. I came across another new item, splash roots. They later became an unexpected saviour for me. I entered Kakariko village with a giant chunk of skyrock in my hand in order to hopefully make it easier to jump down a chasm here. I slightly mistimed my jump though. You could probably guess how this ended. A nearby shrine that took ages to reach ended up being impossible for me as well, to add to my misery. I went back into the depths for a while to try and map out more of it, collecting all the zonite I can find along the way. Back on the surface, I decided to actually make use of auto-build to make a few things, but I was way too low in energy wells to travel anywhere effectively. If only there was a quicker way to get lots of them. Well, thankfully there is a not-so-intended way. I tested out an item duplication glitch that doesn't require a bow or paraglider, which almost all of them do seem to require. It involved just doing a shield surf jump, holding an item and pressing Y and plus at the same time, which ends up duplicating all of the items in your hand. I performed it successfully with some zonai charges, but then had to find a location where I could do it on repeat to not break my shield. Shield surfing doesn't damage the shield on snow, and I found this rock that I could jump off of, but the items kept going all over the place and it wasn't great to perform this glitch here. I returned to the Lucky Clover Gazette, and this box outside right here has a perfectly flat piece of snow-covered ground in front of it, which was perfect for me to carry out this glitch. I spent a few hours continuously duping all of the items that would be helpful for me later on. Of course I didn't go too far, as I knew I could just come back and make more if I was running low, and I didn't want to get repetitive strain injury either. Every so often I'd go to the forge construct to get more crystallised charges, then cash them in at the crystal refinery for more energy wells. I duplicated a bunch of Sundalines and Highland tomatoes as well, as when combined they create a dish unique to Tears of the Kingdom, and it heals gloom damage, which is great for the final boss fights. Then I went all the way to the Highland stable and jumped down its well, because there was an item down there that would benefit me immensely. Say hello to the Ancient Blade. This is the strongest fuse item in the game. Throwing this at a normal enemy will always kill them immediately, and when fused to a weapon it will increase its damage output to 50 for a single hit. Of course, they are extremely rare and one-time use, but I've got the duplication gods on my side, so one was all I needed. I reached Hateno village. I didn't have much business to attend to here, but I did want to get one very important item from Zelda's secret well, that being the well-worn hairband. Great stats. I had attempted to make the perfect hoverbike that trivialises all flying several times during the run, but kept making it the wrong shape and couldn't get it to fly properly. I tried again once more while in the village, and eventually I succeeded. This tiny little machine consisting solely of a steering stick and two fans can fly you anywhere with ease. If you haven't played the game yet and plan on doing so, I would recommend not making one of these and instead use your imagination to build wacky contraptions, as this is what I did on my first playthrough as well, which was much funner and more challenging as well. This test run was a success, though I was still low on energy wells, so my battery ran out fast. With that built, I was finally able to enter higher up areas, such as the Great Plateau, which made gathering Lights of Blessing and therefore getting heart containers a much faster process. After boosting them by a nice amount, I also got some more energy wells, hopefully enough for the next thing on my checklist, which was a certain piece of armour in Hyrule Castle. That armour is of course the Champion's Leathers, distinct from the Champion's Tunic from Breath of the Wild. Getting to the higher reaches of the castle was very easy with my trusty little hoverbike, especially with all the breaks in between, including that shrine, and within minutes I reached the sanctum, chucked some fire fruits into the torches and obtained the Champion's Leathers. And they were never unequipped. With motivation for not too many shrines left in me, I just kept pressing on for a few more hours, eventually settling on 11 hearts. For now at least. Also, something I built off camera was one of the falling sky blocks, but with a fan attached to it, just so that I could store it on auto build. That way I had an easy way to jump down any chasms now, including the Kakariko village one, which I failed at earlier. This meant that I had access to more forge constructs, so increasing my battery life would be faster in the long run. Back at the dupe spot, I spent a while doing front flips until I had a massive amount of golden apples, zonite, large zonite, crystal charges, ancient blades, sundalines, highland tomatoes and food made from the latter two items. I used the large zonite to get even more charges, and buying out the stock quickly meant I needed to unlock more mines. I kept doing this on repeat for each one, and I also beat the Yiga clan members here for Schema Stone. This schematic wasn't particularly useful, but the one I got in the Hiteno mine was a whole lot better. That was the bridge, which is incredibly useful to pull out of your pocket in sticky situations. So, as you can see, I did a bit of off-screen grinding and was able to get so many energy wells that there was no way I would ever run out of battery in any situation. After just a little more grinding and duping, I declared that I was ready to start taking on the temples. Of course, I won't be doing that just yet. Oh hey, welcome back. The preparations were all complete, and it was time to take on as many dungeons as I could. I decided to take them on in the same order as I did them in my one and only playthrough I had previously done of Tears of the Kingdom. That order was Wind, Lightning, Water, Fire and Spirit. Using my handy dandy hoverbike, complete with a ridiculous amount of battery life, getting to Rito Village was nice and easy. The main worry about the wind temple I had originally was of course the verticality of the journey there, but this flying machine was going to be enough to carry me there. Along with this, it gets incredibly cold, but my plethora of golden apples would do the trick in that regard. All in all, things were looking pretty positive for this first temple. Chulin here is getting mad because Taba won't let him go and check out the big storm cloud that is causing Rito Village to be uninhabitably cold, and then Link of course shows up. On the subject of people seeing Link for the first time, I found out from comments on the first video that I got my timelines muddled up. I said that Link had been missing for years, but he'd actually only been gone for a few weeks, and it was actually Link and Zelda's underground expedition that had been years after the events of Breath of the Wild. So anyway, the task here was to bring Chulin to the temple. Though we don't know it's a temple right now, it's just a big storm cloud, as far as we're concerned. I made my way over to the nearby hut to talk to this emo-looking Rito, then made my way through this cave, did a fun little laser-dodging shrine, and showed off the overwhelming power of having hundreds of ancient blades in my inventory. I met up with Chulin again and unlocked his ability, which I never used because it propels you while using the paraglider. His bow had been stolen, and the game expected me to shoot this Arakuda out of the air, and ancient blades just couldn't reach up far enough to hit it. I thought of a better plan, which was to fly over to it using this makeshift plane, and after getting nice and close I'd chuck something at it for the kill. But then the collision with the plane killed it anyway. The game expects you to ascend slowly up all of the floating debris while using Chulin's ability to fly forward, but I ignored all of that and just flew all the way there, ignoring all of the complex platforming that the developers spent ages working on. I had to land every so often because the devices themselves eventually run out of juice even if you've got plenty battery life, so I needed to keep recreating them, but it wasn't too much of an issue. The temperature got much lower the closer I got to the storm, and I also found out from a comment on the first video that I could have fused a fire-like stone to a shield for warmth, which I forgot all about. Another thing I forgot was that you're supposed to enter from the top, so Link had one nasty looking fall. Recovering from that failure, this time I actually remembered to go in through the top. You're expected to bounce on these ships to gain altitude, but again I was ignoring the dev's intended route and not being told to go back or being voided out, and I always appreciate when games let you find alternative solutions like this. I did a really cool trick on my bike and propelled myself to the top of the storm. The next big problem was coming up because I knew I'd be kicked off the machine as soon as I crossed the threshold of changing location, and would have to land on something solid without a paraglider. Fortunately, a cutscene saved me. No wait, no it didn't. I was able to land on these without dying, however without a paraglider I couldn't sail over to the main temple safely. Therefore I just took a leap of faith to see what would happen, and I was in fact saved by a cutscene. So in this temple there are 5 locks that need to be deactivated using Chulin's ability. Thankfully I just needed to make the gusts of wind, no flying was required. However, not being able to be airborne did make navigating this place quite a pain. Also, Chulin is able to shoot enemies with arrows. It's him using them and not me, so that's fair game for this challenge, and does come in handy occasionally. I entered various parts of the temple, reaching the locks and using Chulin's gust ability to blow them inwards to unlock the device in the centre. Not the most thrilling experience, had to use my brain a few times for ways to get around not having a paraglider or bow, though it was easy. The main difficulty would come up afterwards. I got the 5 of them sorted, and then it was time to summon the boss. I had prepared pretty well for this, so I wasn't too worried. Lots of healing, lots of high damage throwable items, and lots of zonite to summon lots of flying machines. Should be an easy win. And so, here is Colgera, one of 5 temple bosses. A problem here though is that you start the fight in the air. There was another area of this temple where the updraft was so strong that I didn't take any damage from soaring downwards, so I took my chances to see what would happen. Okay, so that was just a test run. I actually respawned in a higher up area. This was something I took for granted when it first happened, warping back down to the ground, but this skyblock came in clutch later on. Summoning a hoverbike, I used it to climb onto this part of the temple roof. I then proceeded to enact my master plan. Alright, so I needed more altitude, so I just built a bunch of more skyblocks and stuck them together, which was a much better solution. Okay, how about 3? It became very clear that throwing ancient blades wasn't going to work. They were so light that the wind was carrying them away, and it only took damage from heavy force going through those segments in its body. I was also losing health fast due to the cold, which wasn't exactly helping. Just ignore this, I wasn't thinking straight. I deliberately face-planted so I could just respawn on that higher up area again. I horrendously mistimed my first attempt at nosediving through its body, however from this I learned that I could just void out and then respawn back up here without dying. Forcing myself to be patient and take this nice and slow, I waited for it to throw the icicles at me, then afterwards dived through the ice sheets of its body to deal damage. After that, I would just dive straight down into the bottomless pit and respawn back up top. I then realised it would be even easier to just take a Zonai device with me, as I'd be able to angle myself directly above the ice sheets, as I didn't have access to a paraglider. Having no paraglider also meant this happened sometimes. Combining that with no bows meant I had to angle myself with a hoverbike and make sure that the ice sheet wasn't directly above solid ground. It was made more annoying by how it sometimes would start moving immediately after the ice sheet was exposed rather than waiting a few seconds, so it was an awful matchup for me. Eventually though, I did manage to get it 3 times without dying. And well, it's Zelda, so 3 hits equals phase 2. It was irritating that the game dropped me from the sky for the start of the second phase. Obviously I knew I could just void out, but then it respawned me back on the main deck rather than back on my safe and secure skyblock. The tornadoes were a big problem as well, as they just kept coming and prevented me from getting anywhere on the hoverbike. You're expected to be using the paraglider with the updrafts to avoid these, but I just had to go and make this big difficult challenge for myself, so I just needed to roll with it. Things were not looking good at all, however. Every time I tried to gain any altitude, I'd immediately get knocked out of the air. I had my sights set on that block up there, as it looked high enough that I'd be able to plunge attack Kogera. And then I missed it. That took me many attempts to get close to there. Countless attempts later, I got back up there again and actually landed properly. It was now killing time at last. I plunged straight through the ice sheet, then realised it was directly above solid ground. Instead of dying, I warped to the Wind Temple with the hope that it would still have health missing. Then I decided to stop playing for a while. I declared to myself that I'd put the game down, maybe for a day or two, and start the boss fight again from scratch. Hopefully by then, I'd have come up with a better solution. Then, 10 minutes later, I turned my Switch back on and gave it another go. This time I was full of confidence that I could do it. Ignore that little stumble there. Breaking its armour on one single attempt, it was time for phase 2 once more. When I respawned, I marked this skyblock on the map so I knew exactly where to fly to during phase 2. I then just had to hope that while flying there, I wouldn't be interrupted by the tornadoes. I beat phase 1 again, easily as I'd done it so many times by now. I navigated indoors as much as possible to avoid getting hit, and then I was up in the air again. I didn't realise, however, that those tornadoes actually make steering more difficult, and I kept flying into the barrier and voiding out. I thought at first I was just being stupid, but the steering just completely stopped working whenever the tornadoes were active, and things would not fall kindly for me. I tried a different approach, with a rocket-powered wing with 3 fans instead of 2, and it was even worse. I just kept at it for ages using the normal hoverbike, and I landed on what I thought would be a suitable platform, but Kogera didn't like it and wouldn't allow me to settle down there. Eventually it stopped camping my spot and I was able to start attacking. I got agonisingly close a few times and it was so frustrating. I do not recommend this to anyone. I mustered up the courage to attempt to reach the original block from phase 1 and those bloody tornadoes and yeah. I finally reached the platform I was gunning for after about 2 hours and then the attack began. Ignore that one. And so, after many hours of attempts, I did one final plunge and Colgera met its demise. So yes, Colgera is in fact perfectly possible to beat without any Breath of the Wild items. It's just unbelievably difficult. I got a heart container, then Chulin got the Sacred Stone, a cutscene played, he became a sage, etc, etc. And all the snow melted in Rito Village. It would have flooded the place, but let's not nitpick. The area in Twilight Princess that Morpheal is in drains like 1,000,000 litres of water immediately after you win. Physics in Zelda games never make much sense. Credit to BotW for this footage, by the way. It's from a speedrun of his I had playing on my other monitor while editing this. Great speedrunner, great musician, and unbeatable at Twilight Princess. Which is also my favourite game, and I'll definitely make videos on it in the future. Anyway, I got Chulin's Vow, meaning I could summon him at any time. I did a little supply run of Zonite, then made my way to the desert. I'd already visited the shrine at the Karakara Bazaar, so could easily get there. It's a lot less inviting than it was in the previous game, and the fact that a blood moon was forming made it even spookier. I touched upon this in the first video, but I was almost certain that this was going to be impossible, but I was going to give them all a go regardless. Also, Gibdos are new to this game, unfortunately way less scarier than previous iterations, but their bones are a new item, so I could use them to strengthen items if need be. I flew over to Gerudo Town, which is ironically more inviting here than is in Breath of the Wild, as none of the guards are around to stop Link from wandering in. The only threats here are barely functioning Gibdos. With this game showing off yet again its many underground areas, I hopped down into the waterway and ascended into the Gerudo Sanctuary. Men aren't allowed in Gerudo Town, however Link has made them aware that he is one of the good ones, so he's got a free pass. It does mean, however, that this game is lacking the Gerudo armour. Never forget what they took from us. Right, heading into the North Gerudo ruins, I needed to meet Riju, who was trying to perfect her new technique. And you know what that was missing? Link's help. And what is required to offer said help? Yeah, not helpful for me. I tried everything that was legally available to me. Throwing weapons didn't work, throwing objects didn't work, directly attacking it didn't work, shock fruits didn't work, bombs didn't work. I had one more idea, however. I headed all the way back to the sky, heading towards this archipelago in the Necluda sky. It was the easiest place where I could find a dispenser that sold a few very specific Zonai devices that I wanted to test out. I also wanted these same devices just for general use later anyway, so it was good to get this done now. I chucked in a ton of large Zonai charges because I love to watch that massive amount of balls come out of these machines. Don't look at me like that. One of the items I wanted was a construct head. Stabilizers not so much. Hydrants were going to be useful to me later, and carts were fine, I guess. After mindlessly collecting all the balls, I headed over to a different island to do the same thing. This time I was looking for time bombs and... no, not springs. Cannons. I forgot how construct heads work, and realised that they don't actually shoot anything, so that was no good. I then tried to see if a cannon could act in a similar way to an arrow. It didn't. I wanted to also see if a time bomb would trigger it, but of course, it was also a bust. I was still too stubborn to give in though. The answer is no. You absolutely cannot even enter the Lightning Temple without firing an arrow. And even if I did manage to get inside, you also need to shoot them to activate the panels. Therefore, impossible. Next destination, Zora's Domain. The place is covered in sludge that is polluting the water, and upon cleaning the statue I got the attention of Sidon's fiancée, and those two words combined cause a lot of people to become depressed when the game first came out. Heading to the newly created Mipha court, I met Sidon and he told me where I needed to go next. After doing that, of course. I then travelled there without the Zor armour, landed in the muck, talked to this old guy, picked up a tablet and slotted it into this wall, and saw that accursed word once more. I wasn't going to let that discourage me though. I then went to my next location in order to meet King Dorephan, the cave under Zora's domain. Then I realised I was in the wrong place and went to the pristine sanctum. I talked to the king and he gave me 5 king's scales. Heading on over to the floating scales island, I knew I needed to shoot an arrow through this droplet with a king's scale attached, so I tried alternative methods. The first idea was of course just throwing one through the droplet. I actually got it through and nothing happened. I attached it to a weapon and threw it through the hole and nothing. I was in denial, so I reloaded a few times and kept trying the same methods, and I eventually just had to concede and say that it was not going to be possible. The water temple, just like the lightning temple, cannot even be entered with these restrictions. Before the next temple, I did a few more shrines, as I needed to have a lot of health if I wanted to survive it for any amount of time. I also used up Moore's large zonite for crystallised charges, and after running back and forth for a while, I ended up with enough of them to max out my energy cell. Probably a bit overkill, but it meant I had no chance of running out at all. And now it was time to see if I could complete the Fire Temple. Goron City's major malfunction is that everyone's digging up and eating cursed rocks, and Yunobo has been mind controlled by fake Zelda. I needed to head over to Yunobo Co HQ and fight him. And this was going to be my first taste of the difficulty of the upcoming dungeon. This is because this location is so hot that just being here causes Link to catch fire. And without any access to the Flamebreaker set or fireproof elixirs due to them being in Breath of the Wild, I had to just be on fire at all times while constantly healing. Regardless of that, I beat him and the mask came off, he returned to normal and I unlocked his power, which I actually could use. I needed to do something about this fire though. If only I had some kind of object that could put out fires. Splashroot came to the rescue, resetting the timer for taking damage from fire. I was low on them though, and I couldn't duplicate them using my one working glitch as they would all burst when dropping them, so this wasn't going to be sustainable. However, hydrants certainly are sustainable. Just don't ask where all the water comes from. I gave it a test run and it completely negated any of the fire effects. I now had a perfect solution to the biggest problem about the Fire Temple. Making my way up the mountain, when I reached the summit, doing a little shrine in between for the fun of it, I talked to Yunobo and the big scary boss appeared. It's not difficult, you just fly over it and launch Yunobo at its heads to destroy them. Despite that, I still did make a mistake at one point. This opened up the chasm to Death Mountain, the next thing I was concerned about. I had my skyblock that I could summon at any time, but the problem here is the fact that it's not just a straight drop to the bottom. But I wasn't going to get anywhere by deliberating with myself, so I just went for it. Dropping down to the first rock jutting out, I had a rough idea of what I'd need to do. Create a block, drop down to each rock, and... Okay, attempt number 2. Attempt number 3. This was a success, and I actually saved the game when I landed, so I had a good point to jump from next, and kept doing that the lower I got. The very next fall I had from a block looked as though I was going to be plummeting to a sure death. However, I somehow held on and got down to this molten rock. I was taking constant damage from being here though, so I needed to do a lot of panic throws of Splashroot and hydrants. Next drop was another easy one, though the hole was getting to a more awkward shape, so I attempted to fly down instead. You can easily guess how this ended. Next attempt ended with me falling all the way down, though I decided to let Link fall into the lava, knowing it would actually void him out, which is more useful than just dying constantly. And then, after a few more failed attempts, well, a lot, actually. Also realising Zonai devices just wouldn't work at all, I finally got the block to fall correctly and not at a weird angle. And then when it finally dropped correctly into the lava, I just decided to jump in and melt anyway. The next attempt was a success, but then that had led to the world's hardest game of The Floor is Lava, which was made much harder by the floor actually being lava. My best plan was just continuously keep auto-building sky blocks and stick them together to slowly but surely building a bridge leading to the nearby solid object that wouldn't cause me to burn to death. This took a lot longer than I'd made it look, but thankfully there were no mistakes made and I did eventually reach this statue from there and was able to take off and get to the light route, meaning I never had to do this ever again. From there, I then made my way directly to the fire temple. I broke the rock to get in, and of course this temple's puzzle is exactly the same as the wind temple, and also the other two I didn't get to attempt. I used too much zonite and golden apples, so I did more duplication and then built the ultimate invention that would make me invincible within the fire temple. I also stuck a hydrant on the front so I could create platforms in the lava. I am truly a genius. Back in the temple, I realised that due to how vertical this place was, that cool car I built was going to be pretty useless. Oh well. I banged the gongs using Yunobo's ability. It was the same idea as the wind temple, so I won't get too much into it. I just went through the temple like normal. Ignore that. Putting out the fires on Link with hydrants when things became too much, eventually realising that simplicity was the key for keeping him hydrated in this place. Banging on the last of the gongs, I was then able to enter the boss's chamber. This was a huge relief from Kogera. Much easier. No flying or awkward positioning required, just a simple few smacks from Yunobo, some slashes from Ancient Blade infused weaponry, and Marbled Goma was defeated, drawing to a level 2-2 on dungeons that I managed to complete. I got another heart container and all the marble rock roasts faded away and the Gorons returned to normal. That's 2 of the 4 shrines of Hyrule helped out, with the other 2 just left to suffer. Also, I got Yunobo's vow, so I could use him whenever. Oh, there he is. I had one more temple left to do. I have only beaten this game once. In doing so I actually 100% completed it, so naturally there have been about 300 hours worth of gameplay done after beating the game, and I'd forgotten a lot of key details. One of which was how you actually open the Spirit Temple. I assumed that you needed to do Taro's quest, where he brings you to the Zonai ruins in the Faron province. You get the charge set, which is unique to Tears of the Kingdom, and then that lets you get to the Thunderhead Isles, reach the end, pick up the mask, bring it to Tobio's Hollow, enter and finish off the Construct Factory, then complete the Spirit Temple. In reality, however, you don't need to do any of that. It's just a lot harder to do without all of those steps. It's also rather unlikely that people would just stumble across this, but always possible. Again, the devs really thought of everything. So I flew on over to the Thunderhead Isles, flying completely blind as I hadn't gotten rid of the thundercloud covering the entire area. When I reached Dragonhead Island, because of the speed I was going combined with all the effects on screen, the game froze and I got kicked off my bike, and it was a long way down to the ground. The second attempt was more successful. The game didn't freeze up and I eventually reached the area that leads to the mask. Unfortunately, I still couldn't see a thing and forgot where to go, eventually finding the shrine by accident. After completing the shrine, I headed to the big scary door and I had more than enough health to survive opening it up. Once opened, I had access to the mask. I wasn't expecting this to happen. A quick Google showed that only a handful of people had actually seen this message, and the solution seemed like one that I didn't want to do. But I wanted to beat as many temples as possible before taking on the end of the game, so I had no choice. I headed back to Lookout Landing, spoke to Pura, started up all the Skyview towers, and got to the paraglider. I put off getting it for as long as possible so I didn't end up accidentally deploying it, but now was finally the time. I don't know why they made it so that you need the paraglider to do the Spirit Temple, but that's just how it is. What I was also dreading was the fact that you actually need to get launched out of this before you can actually leave here, which is also the only way to map out regions. Of course, an easy solution to this is just a warp before hitting the ground, so no use of the paraglider was required. Also, I talked to Pure afterwards and actually finally got the quest telling me to investigate all the problems happening in Hyrule, and there was a unique dialogue for me having already completed the Wind Temple and Fire Temple specifically. Again, they really thought of everything. Returning to the thundery Sky Islands, I was able to properly interact with the mask. After opening up the floor and pointing a beam at the surface, I then took it on a journey all the way down there. Putting the mask on its little pedestal, the entrance to the depths opened up completely against my predictions. Taking it inside, I was able to then do the 5th temple. Well, not yet actually. I had to build a mech body for Minoru by picking up parts from the various depots of the construct factory. So it was time for some little puzzles to get the 4 body parts back to the main body. I got the left leg, then the right arm, then the left arm, then finally the right leg. And I used this bridge schematic to skip 2 of the 4 puzzles. Once that was done, Minoru's physical form was created in the form of a giant mech, and from there we rode towards the Spirit Temple. Well, some prep was needed first, but after that I made the pilgrimage towards the temple. I somehow ended up at the wrong entrance, and disappointingly couldn't just go in alone, so my bridge was the saviour of the story once more as I got into the temple with Minoru. It's not a big temple at all. The main puzzle was the construct factory, so straight away it was boss time. Very fun boss. Not too difficult. I had a bit of a tough time at the start of phase 2 until I realised I could just knock it down using bombs, and after not too long I was done. I got another heart container and then also got Minoru's vow. 3 temples out of 5, not bad at all. Before I took on the finale of the game, I needed to cash in what little lights of blessing I had left. That wasn't a good sign of things to come. 1 extra heart container was enough for me, I thought. Whether or not I'd regret that choice, well, we'll find out soon enough. I also had a little stay at a stable for bonus hearts and stamina, and then it was time to finish this. I warped to the shrine high up in Hyrule Castle, summoned forth my hoverbike once again, and then made the slow descent into the depths. I used my old reliable skyblock to get me down to the ground safely. I was tempted to go for the light route there, but I had a horrible feeling like would be a puddle of blood at the bottom of the depths if I made an attempt at that, so I stuck with the patient option. This whole area was filled with intimidating enemies that inflict gloom damage, but I had a secret weapon called Hundreds of Ancient Blades. I was completely fine with using every loophole I had access to get around the rules of the challenge, hence the heavy use of the duplication glitch. You are going to see a lot of Ancient Blades being thrown today. They truly were the MVP of this run. I may have been a bit too liberal with my use of them at times though, they definitely weren't needed on a Keese. Lynels don't count as bosses, despite them being harder to kill than most bosses, so they're also obliterated in one hit by these blades. To clear up any confusion as well, Ancient Blades are new items to this game, very similar to Ancient Arrows, but the key difference is that Ancient Arrows are separate items from them, therefore they're allowed. And I am so glad they're allowed, otherwise there may have been a slightly bigger delay between episodes. My silly eyes were drawn to this falling block, making me think I needed to use recall on it, but that was not the case. I in fact needed to climb a different block that had fallen nearby that I didn't notice, but instead I decided to climb in style. Unfortunately, even after 100 hours of managing to play smart without needing a paraglider, I still made these sorts of blunders. Round 2. I actually noticed the correct block and rode it up the boring and correct way. Then I encountered some scary enemies that died slightly quicker than the devs intended them to, though a little tougher for me because I'm useless at dodging. Not a good sign for the bosses. Speaking of the bosses, the finale involves lots of gloom damage, so I had done a lot of pre-preparations, with 2 of the only materials I can actually cook with being sundelions and tomatoes. I just tried to ignore these Keeses and, yeah. I actually did kill them this time to remove any distractions and made my way further down. I got this message. I actually had no idea what it meant and thought I'd somehow come here too early, but it just means that my sage's vows will no longer work. Not that they're ever much help anyway. Continuing my streak of being wasteful with extremely rare items, I then headed to cross this gap, which had a boss down on the ground that I had to fight. It was some fun gloom spawn, which once defeated would then also turn into a phantom Ganon. Trying to fight these hands without a bow is, as I found out, not a thrilling task. I ran up here and found a small ledge that I could stand on and throw things at them while I could stay safe. It seemed as though the eyes wouldn't actually take crit damage unless I was hitting them with arrows though, and so I got bored of Ancient Blades doing basically nothing and turned to Blum Flowers, which were much more effective thanks to the AoE that they cause. And then I had a bit of an uh-oh moment. I went into this full of confidence and that went out the window pretty quickly. I reloaded the game as I wanted to see if I could just ignore the hands and go straight across. And the answer was yes. For some reason I had it in my head that the Phantom Ganon here was mandatory, but obviously not. This area was filled with silver enemies, but again, Ancient Blades to the rescue. I would have attacked at least some of these with proper weapons, but due to me not being allowed to use Korok seeds, I had very few weapons, and they needed to last me through 5 long drawn-out boss fights. I ended up at the area from the very beginning of the game, which eventually led me to another big pit. And again, what would be a nice simple fall with the paraglider turned into way more of an ordeal than it needed to be. First, I tried biking my way down. The way that this hover bike is created, however, means that to lower the altitude, I had to quickly stop and start, which didn't help me much here. Yeah, you get the idea. My favourite skyblock with a fan attached came to the rescue once more, and although the gloom branches sticking out of the walls tried to stop me, I got down in one piece. And now I was at the very end. Well, I had one more drop to do, but this one leads straight down to a cutscene, so I could just dive down. Or not. So I had to go down the boring way. The long, boring descent. I really hoped that I could beat this first time so that I wouldn't have to keep doing this every time I died down there. Anyway, I reached the bottom. This cutscene played where Ganondorf summons his big army to fight. The sages that I saved earlier all show up, and there's a big showdown. My grand strategy for these fights was just to let the others attack, while occasionally chucking Ancient Blades to make the fight go quicker. Before we go any further, yes, I did use Ancient Blades on red bokoblins, despite them dying in 1 or 2 hits from normal weapons. I guess you'll just need to find out if I ended up learning from my mistakes later on. Regardless of that, the bokoblin phase was the nice, easy introduction, and with a lot of help from the sages, it was followed by the Zalfos phase. And this one was also pretty easy. Next up, Gibdos. Without arrows it's a bit of a pain, but who cares when you've got one-hit kill items. Of course, no bow makes them harder to aim, but overall still no problem. Finally, it was the Moblin gang, and just like the others, I let the Sage do the majority of the fighting while I ran in for the occasional cheap shots. If you've beaten the game correctly, as the Lord intended, all that would be left is the final boss. But I'd skipped a few temples, so I needed to beat the bosses that I missed out on. Now, everything leading up to this was the easy part. That was not on my mind when I saw Muktarok show up. Every time I've fought it, it's been incredibly easy and has died in a matter of minutes. So why was this any different? First of all, it hits like a truck when you have terrible armour and no available items to increase your defence. But along with that, you need to hit Muktarok with water to weaken it. And by weakening it, I mean literally do any damage. My splash fruit supply was running pitifully low, and I was not paying attention to its attack patterns, so I died very quickly. Attempt number 1 was a failure. Before jumping down the pit again, I decided I'd increase my splash fruit supply. I did try to duplicate them before, but they'd always burst when I threw them down 5 at a time, so I had to dupe 1 at a time instead. It was very slow, so I just decided that 20 would be enough. I also fused Ancient Blades to all of my weapons. You only get 1 hit out of them, but it deals an extra 50 damage, which would be good to swing at bosses. With that done, I went back into the arena and gave it another go. I beat the bokoblins, the Zalfos, the Gibdos, and the Moblins, and got back to Muktarok with no issues. Unfortunately, Muktarok was a huge issue. You're either supposed to use Sidon's ability, which I obviously can't have here, or shoot splash fruit from a bow, which I can't use, thanks to my rules. So I just had to keep awkwardly throwing splash fruits and hope to outrun it. After being hit by water twice, it becomes vulnerable, But even then, the game expects you to use a bow as it runs away pretty quickly, so doing this all close quarters was very frustrating. It did feel satisfying to absolutely wail on it when I did finally start actually getting the hang of it though. I was not dodging its attacks very well, so I used a fallen block to have some space off the ground, which did work to a degree. I kept following the same process of hitting it with a few splash fruits, battering it with ancient weaponry, then once it went back into shark mode, fusing more ancient blades to my weapons, rinse and repeat. Eventually, after enough hits, I got it to half health, and then this is when the real fight began. During phase 2 it sprays sludge all over the arena which massively reduces movement speed. It can of course be cleared out of the way by water, and if I had a machine that could catapult me into the air, I'd be able to easily just shoot it. But hey, I decided to make myself suffer through this challenge, so I just had to slowly but surely hit it with splash fruits in between its attacks, and then after 2 hits, start hitting it with my melee weapons. An annoying thing about this phase is that it actually dies away much quicker than phase 1, and it hops between all the muck piles. Again, if I could shoot it, this would be easy, but oh well. Because I couldn't think of any other option, I started duplicating splash fruits again. This was a bad idea because I really did need my shields for the final fights, but I was getting desperate. When I got back up to 20, I started to give it another go. I started using Minoru to get through the sludge quicker, but she's ridiculously slow compared to the boss, so this and running were both terrible options. My sanity was reducing more and more during this phase. I've cut the footage down substantially, but going from the start of the fight to now was over 20 minutes long. The many splash fruit throw misses didn't help of course. There was also too much sludge to get rid of for it to make any difference. You know, Bo, I swear to God, please actually be useful. I just started getting really annoyed by this. I wasn't in the right headspace at the time, I needed a break, so I just quit. Thank you very much for watching. It was a shame that I had to declare that the challenge was impossible, but Muck Rock just proved too difficult for me. Nah, you know me, I'd never give up on something so trivial. The next day I was feeling way more confident. I had done some prep beforehand and found out about a glitch that I'd never heard of, but if I could pull it off, it would actually trivialise this boss and potentially all others. It was a very precise glitch. Basically, I needed to swing a weapon, then pause just before impact. If I did it correctly, the game would then be able to store the fact that I was about to deal damage, and then viewing a memory would then cause the game to think I'm doing it twice. So then, if I was to keep viewing memories, I'd keep building up damage. A weapon with more than 50 damage output would be multiplied by the amount of memories I viewed. I was really bad at timing it, so much so that I actually got Muck Rock to half health by the time I'd finally pulled it off. But with a weapon with 57 power, if I viewed a memory say 20 times, it would deal 1140 damage. Muck Rock probably had about 900 HP left and... Oh, yeah, of course. You can't view memories here. Of course. How silly of me to think otherwise. Well, I guess this was the game's way of punishing me for trying to take the easy way out. TDM it is. Oddly enough, despite the fact that during phase 1 I was only attacking in order to try and pull this glitch off, I inadvertently did a really good job of hitting it, barely took any damage myself and didn't use up too many resources. I also started to get pretty good at dodging its attacks, so I thought maybe I could just win this legitimately. And guess what? I was right. But of course I couldn't celebrate yet. That was just one of 2 absolute ball aches that I'd have to endure here, the next one being Queen Gibdo. This was the one I was dreading before going into this. I didn't think Muck Rock would be a problem, but I knew this would be much harder. That sand attack is very annoying to dodge, and does a lot of damage with my low armour rating, and although she is weak to fire, the fruits deal barely any damage at all. Ancient Blades were also pretty pathetic, but I didn't want to attack directly because I needed to save the weapons for later. I had the bright idea to use Minoru with 2 flame emitters attached. What's the worst that could happen? Ah, right. I could completely miss because I couldn't get anywhere near her with Minoru, since the contract is so slow and the boss is so fast. Her body is also deceptively skinny, so it was really hard to hit her with projectiles. Overall, it just generally wasn't a very good time. After spending too long failing over and over, I quit the game. Again. I didn't have travel medallions since they existed in Breath of the Wild, which is a shame because it meant that if I left here, I'd have to go all the way back. But I decided I was just simply not well equipped enough for these fights. I started by doing more duping, on the snow so I didn't break any shields. I then went on a long journey into the sky to try and reach that giant island up there, which is the Zonite Forge Island. My quest was to go there and find myself some mighty Zonite weapons, as they have very good damage output even before fusing anything to them. The big problem I was having, especially with Muktarok, is that when I was hitting it, I was only getting one hard hit with the Ancient Blade, and the rest were dealing pitiful damage, and the weapons were breaking really quickly. I also just wanted an excuse to visit here because it's such an oddly beautiful and not at all talked about location, with the sunset in the background adding to the beauty. Although I was here for business, not pleasure. I activated the fans, which allowed me to jump down the middle section of the island. The strength of the wind here meant I didn't take any falling damage, and I also decided to do the shrine here for no particular reason. I'm glad I did, because it's one of the funnest shrines in the game. You have to beat all the enemies just using equipment lying around while in low gravity. It was a nice distraction from the hell that I had to go through earlier and the more hell that was awaiting me later. With that out of the way, I went to pick up the items that would frequently spawn here. Those are not mighty Zonite weapons. They are regular Zonite weapons. I had a feeling this may happen. This game and Breath of the Wild have a world levelling system that is invisible to the player, and that level goes up when you defeat an enemy, complete a shrine or a quest, or complete other various achievements. Unfortunately, I had avoided most combat, done a quarter of the shrines and almost no quests. Most people who have reached this location would likely have completed a large amount of the game, so they'd not be seeing pitiful selection of weapons I was seeing. I picked them up anyway, especially since I was still carrying around one of the sticks I got at the start of the game. It was unfortunate that I couldn't find any better weapons here. There are definitely guaranteed spawns for better weapons that are exclusive to Tears of the Kingdom, but at this point, I just decided I'd go back to trying to beat the endgame again. One trip back to the stables later, and it was time for... Oh, but I wasn't just going to break all my weapons beating Muktarok. While I was up on the surface, I built a secret weapon. Do you remember when I built that car covered in fire hydrants that would douse the driver with water that ultimately went unused in the fire temple? Well, I made a modified version where the hydrants are facing out the way. It was very costly in terms of Zonite, and I hadn't had anything to test it on, so I relied on faith for it to work. Before doing anything though, I needed to refresh my supply of ancient weapons. Good going, past me. Well, I guess I just had to go for it. I aggressively pursued the beast, and to my absolute delight, the car worked perfectly. Well, almost perfectly. Getting off it was a bit difficult, what with all the hydrants and giant wheels blocking my way, but was much better than slowly throwing splash fruit. I was now truly feeling confident that I could take down Muktarok easily. I was also using some weapons that had strong parts fused to them that weren't the Ancient Blades, which was quicker and did more consistent damage. It was somewhat demoralising to see that it could destroy the car, making me pay another 48 Zonite to repair it, but I just soldiered on anyway. Phase 2 was when the hydrant car really came in clutch, as the sludge piles were blown away immediately, meaning the boss had less manoeuvrability when out of its shark form. I still missed, a lot, but the best part about this strategy was that it was quicker, and I wasn't taking any damage at all. Also, I was getting to run over and bully the monster that had caused me so much trouble the day before, which was very satisfying. After absolutely battering it on repeat, I took down Muktarok in a matter of minutes, and I was ready to take on the next boss, Queen Gibdo, again. I had something that resembled a plan in my head. It didn't actually work though. Which was worrying because although I now had an easy way to beat Muktarok, I didn't really want to fight it again because it was really annoying. Thankfully the bridge schematic came in handy. I knew that if I could get on top of one of these hives I could safely throw projectiles at Queen Gibdo. And that's exactly what I did. For about 30 seconds, and then I realised it was a terrible idea because, I mean, look at that damage output. Then a giant light bulb burst out of my head and I realised that I should just be using Zonite devices, just like in the last fight. Cannons are strong, don't use up much battery life, and can be aimed from up here pretty safely. Once I actually started to get the angles correct, although I still wasn't doing too much damage, I was at least hitting consistently and wasn't spending any resources at all. I stuck two of them together, and although it still fired one, it also meant that I could recall them infinitely, since I was so low on cannon items and had lots of zonite. I did occasionally have some blunders where I would get hit by a blast of sand or shoot myself and fall off the hive, so being able to respawn zonai items was very much welcomed. This fight in its entirety was one of the most boring experiences I've ever had playing any game, so I won't make you suffer through the same fate. I sped it up some more by attaching fire to my cannon, which also made it look cooler, always good when you're sitting and waiting for something to die for half an hour. During this absolute snooze fest, I met an unfortunate roadblock when I got down to half HP. You see, it starts spawning Gibdos out of the hives during phase 2. I don't have Riju's ability, and nor do I have any reliable way of destroying the hives when they open up. Though I didn't want to destroy them, since I needed to climb back up them. Because the game also spawned me back on the ground, with the fast and rabid zombies chasing after me. After some very tense and frustrating attempts, I eventually managed to spawn a bridge without being flattened by Queen Gibdo or interrupted by one of the smaller ones, and was able to get back up onto my safe spot. Surprisingly, once I actually got up here, phase 2 was easier due to the boss being more aggressive and therefore easier to hit from short range. I also found out that you can destroy the hives using cannons. From that point on, I made sure to not angle it too close to the one I was standing on. So anyway, after way too long, I finally won, and it was time to not take on Ganondorf. I genuinely forgot that you have to fight Phantom Ganon here if you didn't fight him at Hyrule Castle, which you can only do if you did the 4 main temples. So, yeah. There was still yet another boss before I could actually take on the proper end of the game. It started perfectly with me getting hit by my cannon from the previous fight that was somehow still active. The boss fight is pretty annoying. You have 5 different Phantom Ganons at once, though the companions are surprisingly useful in this fight, likely to make up for them contributing in no way whatsoever to the previous one. The unfortunate thing here was my palms being rather sweaty, not unlike a certain 90s musician, and also I was a bit out of practice with the perfect dodges, so I kept getting hit. This was not ideal since the hits sometimes deal gloom damage, and I needed to consume my gloom healing food for the next fight. And I also wanted to get as much use of these gloom weapons as possible, which damage Link when used extensively. I finally started to get the hang of the dodging again, and the rest of the fight went pretty smoothly. Continuing to pick up each of the weapons they dropped, I reached phase 2, which was basically the same, but the Phantoms had slightly better weapons. I don't know why I spawned a cannon here, I really don't. I just kept on killing them. It was easier than phase 1 because I actually had gotten the hang of the acrobatics and also picked up some nice new weapons for the final fight. Conserving those weapons and switching back to ancient blades, I won, and then it was time. To fight Kogera, that is. Not really though, the ones I beat all get taken on by the respective sages, so no need to worry there. I just had to focus on walking into the next arena and take down Ganondorf. Of course, before heading into the final fight, I needed to save the game. Oh, okay, I must have misremembered that, because I thought you could save here. So if I die here, I have to go through all of that again. I made lots of gloom healing food from the sundelions and tomatoes I had hoarded, and walked into the final chamber. You know what happens here, though for the benefit of my good friend who never got through the game but wanted to watch these to see what happens. You know who you are. Basically, Matt Mercer, I mean Ganondorf, shows up, says he'll kill Link, and that's about the gist of it. The boss fight is really fun though, and for a Zelda game, actually challenging. Saying that, the dodging practice I had earlier wasn't for nothing, as I managed to very easily flurry rush all of his sword attacks, except that one, ignore that one. The main problem here was that I was using gloom weapons, which were taking a bit of a toll on my health, but I had made lots of food to restore it, so it wasn't a huge concern. And just like that, it was over. Okay, obviously it wasn't over. That was just a wee gotcha for the aforementioned good friend of mine who was excited for part 3 of this challenge. In actual fact, Ganondorf's second phase is the one that's truly difficult. He spawns a whole bunch of clones, the main one does gloom damage and the rest do normal damage, so I just had to make sure Big Boss didn't hit me. He does have an annoying attack that I unfortunately fell victim to here, where he completely destroys your hearts and they can't be restored at all. Also, he can perfect dodge me. And that's how I died. The thought of doing all that again was too much, so I just tried again another day. Right, here we go again. I beat the Demon King's army, very easy as always. I ran over Mucked Rock with my car for a while and eventually killed it. I slowly and boringly angled a cannon at Queen Gibdo, getting through a few podcast episodes in the process. I beat Phantom Ganon and acquired better weapons again. I actually made a lot more gloom food this time. Last time I ran out of it, which is why I died pretty quickly. Then I said hello to Ganondorf again. Phase 1 went down quickly, and Phase 2 took a lot longer. I perfected the coward strat of hitting, running, throwing an ancient blade, running, etc. And after doing that a loop, he was defeated. And that was it. Game complete. Not really, he eats a stone and turns into the demon dragon, but then the light dragon shows up, and I had to do the final fight. One I had been really nervous about. No, Link, no, don't pull out the Master Sword. You're not allowed. No, don't. Bad Link. Well, at least I can just equip another weapon. Wait, no. You have to use the Master Sword here. You literally cannot use any other weapon. Yes, I said weapon. Oh, and a cool thing here is that you literally cannot take falling damage, so having no paraglider was no problem. The game goes out of its way to make sure you can't lose here. Anyway, the damage had to be dealt by throwing items. Very, very slowly. One ancient blade at a time. And every so often I'd randomly get kicked off the demon dragon and I'd have to be rescued. This was probably the longest anyone has ever spent fighting this boss. I obviously won't leave in the horrendously tedious details. I had sped up the footage originally, but because I didn't want to give myself and everyone else seizures, well, let's just skip right to the end. The last one was more annoying to reach than the others without a paraglider, but I landed on its head, and then after a minute or so of ancient blade throwing, something quite annoying occurred. Link decided to pull out the Master Sword, but this was a cutscene, so... oh. Okay, so look, it's a quick time event. I'm not in free play. I can't select a weapon right now. I'm not using a weapon in combat, I just need to press a button to move an event forward. It's technically a cutscene. Is it too late to say that this is another glitch item that doesn't exist in the Breath of the Wild code? Yeah, let's just say this is a cutscene. So I pressed Y in this cutscene that isn't really gameplay, and therefore I'm not using an item from Breath of the Wild. And with that, quest complete. Ganondorf was truly defeated once and for all. Definitely, for real this time. Unless they decide to make a third game in this series, because they know people will fork over the money no matter what. Me included. Oh, and plot twist, the light dragon is actually Zelda, and she can't fly. And Link demonstrates to us once again that as long as you fall into water, you can't die. So there we go, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, completed without ever using any items that existed in Breath of the Wild. I am not counting that Master Sword at the end, fight me. Overall, I am very pleased with how this turned out, and if anyone else can find a way to do all 5 temples with these restrictions, please have a go at it, I'd love to see it. And thank you very much for watching. That's all I have time for, so I shall see you all in the next video, whenever and whatever that may be.